All righty, no attendees. All right. I'm gonna wait till a couple people show up, and then I'll start my introduction. Welcome, everybody. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Whoops. Welcome, everybody, to today's Lunch and Learn. I will be your host, Jared. I am on the training team. Tomorrow will be hosted by Eric Walmerick. He's on product engineering. And if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat or ask them, and I will answer them for you. I have one pre-submitted question already that I can talk about. And this pre-submitted question is over the repository and getting a specific error message. This error message, it is in the chat. Basically, someone asked, I'm getting this error whenever or that they're getting this error stack trace. And I'm actually going to, let me pop this up on my notepad and I'm going to show it because I think this is really good to kind of talk about how to read these kind of stack traces in decisions. Many of us may know how to do this already, but I think this is just good review. So whenever you get an error in decisions, let me just talk about this a little bit. And whenever, what can I do to cause a quick error? I'm going to go here. So if I have an error, let's say I disconnect. Let's say let's just disconnect it. I don't think it would give me a stack trace because I think it'll just say outcome path errored out. Maybe it will. Oh, I know why, because it paused. So if I debug this, I don't think it gives me a stack trace. Oh, perfect. It does give me a stack trace. So whenever you go through errors and decisions, it is always helpful to be able to drill down into what is happening. So for example, whenever you have an error, you always want to show details to see what is happening because this doesn't really give you the detail you're looking for in just the message. So what this does is says, hey, this is basically the flow engine running. It failed running the step create data. So this is saying, hey, there's this step that ran that errored out and it is in the flow dev team B flow test, which you can usually see is the name of the flow that I ran. And then it tells you what the problem was. And then you could see that problem reiterated throughout. So that's kind of the basics of kind of reading through the stack traces in decisions. So let's go back to the one that was asked because that's kind of what's relevant. So as we can see here, what this means is that, hey, that this flow right here, or the flow engine was running a step. It said error running the step user has valid credentials for repository. So there is this step that was running that errored out saying, hey, this step is not working. And specifically, I think I accidentally deleted the latter half of it, which actually tells you where the flow is at. So let me just recopy this so we can see it. Boom, repository. And so that's the step. And then it says inflow, check repository, credentials flow. So what this means is I can actually say, if I want to check this flow out, I can be able to copy that text, put it in here, and boom, I can find this flow. So because I know this is a system flow, because I have it and any decisions instance that you run will have it, I can then edit this flow. Now you don't want to change anything of the system flow because it is used across everywhere. And so what you want to do is you only want to see like what is processing when an event occurs. And so it looks like what's happening here from looking at what the flow design and what this is doing is that this user was trying to add something to the repo, but didn't have the correct user credentials for it. And so the difficulty there is then to resolve it. This is one possible resolution that I would check is on the repository server, make sure the user that is checking out changes to the repo, utilizing the designer repository actions to check into the repo, making sure that they have an account on that repository server. If you're using like repository SSO, it's typically not an issue, but if you're utilizing the manual way where you have to like put in your username and password, whenever you use these repository actions, you can run into this issue. So that's essentially how I would read that and what I would do to troubleshoot that. Alrighty. Okay, so we got some other questions. So need some help with a graph view of a report and drill down by group capabilities. Tyson, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we have a report here. We've grouped it by like department, and then by manager, and then by person, right?
Okay.
And so we were able to make the graph view so that we can have the department, we can drill down into the manager, but then if we try to drill down another time, it doesn't seem to work.
Doesn't seem to work. So you basically, so let me see if I can, I'm gonna create a really quick report to see if I can.
I have one here I can show too.
Awesome. Do you have any, like, so this is recorded, so is this
No, we're good.
confidential
This
data?
is all,
Okay.
yeah, pretend data right now.
Okay,
So
perfect. So yeah, go ahead and share.
awesome.
I just wanted to make sure that was mentioned.
Yeah. Doesn't look like I have the permissions to share yet.
Roman, could we add, give permissions to users to share screen? I think we're working on it. Just
All right,
a few.
I'm here.
All right. Yeah, there we go.
Awesome.
Okay.
See studio?
I do.
Cool. So here, so we have the nice graph, right? Broken up by here. I can click in here and be like, cool, let's go to the billing, and I have a manager in billing. And then if I click to go to people to the next group, we get this fell out. If I go and look at my report though, billing Kylie, I would expect to see these three names pull up.
Sure.
And then they all have data underneath them, of course.
Do that one more time. So we go here, you right click, go to billing, and then you right click further to go more in detail about those. And that's the part that errors out where no data displays. Cool. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Sweet, this is a dev environment. I love it. Can we turn on the global debugger and see if there's anything in the backend that will give us information on why that's failing?
If you tell me how to do that.
Absolutely. So on the bottom left of your screen, you'll see like this wrench with this cog. What you want to do is go ahead and show the global debugger. Now, how we use this, since we don't want this running a lot because it could slow performance down. So all you're going to do is go ahead and turn it on all the way at the bottom, then switch to the studio on the other tab, and then go ahead and perform those actions you just did.
Cool.
The matrix, go to billing. Perfect. Now that's the issue. Now let's go back to the global debugger. Let's see if there's anything populated. So nothing populated. So no flows. I'm assuming the idea is no flows ran in that situation. Okay, cool. So let's turn it off because obviously no flows are running to help us see. So let's go. So in this data, can we edit this report? Let's take a look at it.
Sure. Just remember where it's at. And that'd be easier just to edit directly from here.
Awesome. And let's go to the section where we have those grouping actions.
Is that here? Grouping options?
Yes.
Cool.
Oh. All right, let's go ahead and edit that. So I think this would be level 3, right?
Yeah, level 3 is the one where it's not working.
Okay, so it's just the font size. Orange. All right, close that. So are these custom actions that you created, or is this just the default drilling down that Decisions does?
This is what Decisions does. We just added, so I added a testing view that makes this report. And then when you,
gotcha, okay.
Yeah, when you run it, you get access to drill down in.
To the specific ones, okay.
Yeah, and so you should, like, you can click up here and it'll take you back. So I'd
Mhm.
assume if I was supposed to click here, it'd be like, you know, a Kylie B here.
Mhm. Let's go. So let's close out of this review and then I just want to look at this. The chart label, scroll down
Oh, sorry.
on, you're fine. Scroll down on the right, series average of build. Scroll down. Show elements, okay. Go ahead. Legend position, sure, that's just legend position. What about, let's switch back to the data and let's scroll all the way down to the results. I want to see the results. Hey, let's look at average of the B, average of build.
Yeah, these two scores here.
Okay. Because I'm wondering, okay, so it's just the default adding average that we're using there.
Yep, just the average.
Interesting. Okay. So taking the average and the subtotals, and that's go back to the graph. I want to see, and so we're grouping on, so that graph, so it's a report graph. It's doing it. I wonder, so what if we did this via the actual like graph in the page designer? Is there a difference?
We can try that. One of the things we were running into before
Mm.
was we're having to link the interactions to an evaluation. So it's a one-to-many relationship. And there were some
Gotcha.
issues happening with the graph tile.
Okay.
But we can try that a little bit more.
Gotcha. I would recommend trying that because right here, what I think this is I think this may be some type of bug with like the multiple drill downs, and maybe there's some limitation there. So what I recommend is let's put in a support ticket,
Okay.
and then have them look at it and evaluate for a possible bug. Because this is what this is sounding like to me, is that for some reason you can't have multiple, going all the way down. So
Yeah.
that's where I would go for that.
And once it does, it's going to be amazing, because this is exactly what our executive team wants to see.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, who is next? What is the next question? A question from Jacob. Let's see. The team is having issues with resizing forms between our dev and prod environments. How can we get forms to fit full screen when resizing can be issue across different monitor sizes? Oh, great question. Let's see. I'm actually going to, here is my assumption. I think forms to fit full screen resizing. I wonder if, I'm actually going to ask internally what people would think. My proposition, Jake, would be, I wonder if it's utilizing get forms to fit full screen resizing can be issued. Yes, that's true. Okay, what was my suggestion? Let me share my screen. I'm going to, because what I was thinking, and if, let's see, put this over here, share my screen, screen one, is I'm wondering, let's go to forms. Let's just create a normal form. Let me go to grid sizing. As I wonder if there should be, I thought there was a grid control, and maybe this might have been removed, that allowed a responsive grid. Sections, margin, behavior. And I believe that's when this control would be used for that type of circumstance. Now, I'll be admittedly, I'm not sure. I haven't had a lot of experience utilizing this. So I'm going to put this in our support chat and wait for a response. And see if this is the right approach. And also want to see if there's any documentation over this responsive grid to confirm if this is the right approach. The responsive grid layout, that's with CSS. I'm more interested about the grid. Let's see. Grid uses to control layout compared to regular grid, reduces HTML overhead. This CSS as the ability is particularly useful for creating responsive layouts. Sure, that doesn't really describe to me what it does. Use responsive grid CSS. So there's got to be something over the responsive grid. Let's see. Responsive containers and grids. There we go. Designers can, it's responsive container on sections on forms. When you resize your form. Yeah, so here we go. So this is what I thought. So you would want to build utilizing this responsive because the responsive container shifts dynamically as device changes. So if you're using a phone, if you're using a monitor with different screen sizes, so you'd want to change your design paradigm when you're designing forms to utilize a responsive grid. I'm going to post these documents in the chat. Let's see this one, and also do the last one that I looked at. I don't think that this one would be very helpful because it's applying a CSS. So I'll suggest that. Do you use it as the base template? Is that an option, or do you have to layer it on a form? Do you use it as the base template? Ooh, that's a great question. Let's see. Let's see if I can just do that right now, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to delete this grid that I see here. Make it delete. I want to delete this root container, and then I'm going to add my responsive grid. Alrighty, now how do I do size? Settings, section, no data in lists, behavior, transparent background for size and tabs. Settings, margins. Yep, registration ID, sure. That's just the form background. That's just the properties for that. So responsive grid. I'm actually going to apply a grid over it and see what happens. All right, so I got this grid over it. And let's see. Because I feel like that defeats the purpose. Then it's like, how do you use this control, right? Because if I have to put a responsive grid as the root and then place a grid on top of that, well, then I'm just using a grid. And it's not really showing any of the, I presume that I won't have the benefits of that, the grid-like structure. So I'm gonna put this here. I'm gonna put this number box here, and let's see. And this thing doesn't allow me to change or exercise it. Let me do this, Jacob. I'm gonna research this. Could you type in your email in the chat? Because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play around with this, talk with some devs and interface with it. And then once I've gotten something concrete, I'll email you what I found and how to use this. Because from the onset of it, there's not, let's see, what's this? Minimum take full width. I don't know too much about it. So yeah, if you can, please type your email in the chat. Perfect. No, yeah, my pleasure. That's the fun thing about decisions is I don't know everything about it. And whenever I have something fun to kind of mess around and play with, it makes it very interesting. So interesting, take full width. That looks very interesting. Alrighty. Cool. I'll take a look at that, Vitaly, and see if it's something that's tied to like a custom JS control that you'd have to do. But that may be a possible route. But thanks for the suggestion. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, no worries. We got time. You can also, if you wanna speak, you can. So you don't have to just rely on typing it. If it's a long issue, you can also come off mute and talk.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you.
Great. I'm thinking of the best way to describe it. So
Sure.
we have something called a TS overview dashboard, and this is a dashboard we're using for a lot of our internal facing assignments and tasks. So what we do is we have a bunch of orders kind of coming in. We categorize them as status, and we have a couple reports on this dashboard. So what we've done is on this dashboard, we have created a flow run part in the top that kind of acts as our search bar. So you type in a GUID for a status, it brings it up, and then it refreshes the page. So the multiple reports on this dashboard display certain information based on that GUID.
Okay.
The search bar, there's 3 different identifiers you can type in to get the order. So you can use something called, so you can use the order ID, you can use the DBA name, and you can use what we call a MID, which is a merchant identification number. So there are 3 different identifiers you can use that's going to update this page. What we find while using this, it works basically 80% of the time, and we're looking into best practices for how to utilize these GUIDs, and then search for them. What ends up happening is you type in either the DBA name or the order ID or what have you, and we are using the report's filter functionalities to search for what we want and display that. But that doesn't seem to be like a very efficient way to get what we want. We're looking into either using the flow run part and just trying to if you type in an order ID, instead of trying to use the filter and go through all the data, use it in the flow run part to either use a a DB query we could make or what have you. Really, we're just looking for best practices on how to get those results into our reports and not, tear apart the system essentially, because it doesn't seem to be like the most efficient way, and it fails 10-20% of the time. Hopefully what I've said kind of makes sense. If you need any clarification, I'm happy to try and explain as best I can.
No, absolutely. So my initial thought was, okay, so I'm just trying to reiterate, I just want to make sure I'm on the same wavelength. So we have these reports that are filtered based on 3 things, right? A database name, an ID, or a merchant identifier, or something of that sort. And then if a user searches that and clicks on it, it changes the report view for only relevant to that specific thing that they're searching for. And the paradigm you're using is it's dynamically updating the report filters on those reports, right? And that's kind of what's happening here. And so the problem, is it just performance? What's the issues? It's performance and it's not filtering, or what's that side of the equation?
I'd categorize it as performance, because when you're searching, when you have, 1,000, 2,000 plus results in a report, and you try to use the filters, it seems to sometimes fail or sometimes not do what you want. Another thing I failed to mention is also when you type in, let's say, an order ID and nothing pops up, there isn't really a good way to explain to your user, like a pop-up, hey, we didn't find anything on this report, try something else. Normally you could do that in, say, a flow itself, and if nothing shows up from a DB query or a fetch entity step, you could just put in an end form that says, yeah, nothing showed up, sorry, try again. But when it comes to if you're using the filters on a report and nothing shows up, you lose that functionality. That being said, if we want to use the flow run part just to fetch everything, we're not sure how to get the results from the flow run part into the report. There's no way to, even if it's the same custom data structure, how do you send those data structures you have found with either your DB query or your fetch entities into the report, even if it's on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Sure. A couple of architectural things that come to my mind, and maybe this is something you could explore, is it sounds like you can also use like, you know how you can also dynamically select a report based on that report viewer and say by report ID. And so what I'm thinking is this may be something to investigate, is that instead of this will be limited to the amount of records you're having. If it's in a 1,000,000 record database, I don't think this would be as performant. But what you could do is you could use some flow source reporting and caching, and so that flow run part could use that filter, then run that flow to filter the flow reporting source that report is looking at, and then display and show that data and change that report. And let's say there is a and so what I believe that would do, it will solve the first half of the problem, where you can now have a way where you can filter out and not use report filters to dynamically change report filters, but you're using a flow reporting source. Now you'll have better knowledge on like how big your database is, and if that will changing your design pattern to have some flow structures for reporting, if that would be a significant lift or not. But I know that's one way I can see doing that. Now the other half of the equation, right? What if we have no data? What do we do in that regard? Like I said, like you said, pop-up would be too strange, because it's easily missed. What can you tell me what are the, I don't think you can dynamically switch the contents of a grid or hide grids or show grids on a page. I think it'd be really difficult and also be just a really weird, like crazy way to do that. Because I know, yeah, I'm going to take the latter half of your question and also ask internally, because everything I'm thinking about is not going to be, it's just going to be really wonky. Like what I was thinking of, what you could do is maybe you could dynamically switch the grid to show a different grid and hide it if you use some page visibility stuff, but then that's a little wonky. And that also just really hides the entire page. So I'm not sure how to handle the explaining to the user that there is no data. Obviously you can change the text on the report viewer, like, hey, there's no data or your search was not found, but I don't think that's a dynamic changeable field. So I don't think it's going to be very helpful. So I'm gonna take the latter half of the question offline. What are your thoughts on the first part of the design?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try using the flow source reporting and caching. I think I was just looking for feedback because we had a couple of ideas. Nothing really stood out, but this is just a new one to experiment with.
Sure.
So I really appreciate it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the only thing that would come to my mind, because we actually do that internally. So I have a system where I track all the students that go through the training platform, and we use this external third party where we have to pull a ton of API calls. And since it's about like over 7,000 students, or it's not 7,000, 700 students coming through, and we have to do multiple different API calls to large sections of the training platform. And so what we do is we just API call everything and then cache it, and then we reference the cache on that report. And so it allows us to have better performance that way. So I think that will help eliminate the performance issue that can arise if you're just using flow source reporting, as I'm sure you know.
Yep, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll also get back to you about the second half of like custom messaging when there's no data or whatever.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I'll still be on the call, but if you have no questions, you get all the answers you need, feel free to drop. I'll still be here, so for longer. So if you want to come back on, feel free to do so. So if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute or add them in the chat. Let's see. At decision today, ChatGPT challenge. Do devs need to use their own API keys? I'm actually not sure. I think some of the what is it? I think probably there was an API key that was given, but I'm not sure of the structure of it. It could people could have might have had their own or something to that effect. All right. If there's no more questions in about 3 minutes, we'll end the call. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your attendance. Tomorrow will be Eric Wolmerink. He's one of our product engineering team members, and he will be going over on hosting the Lunch and Learn. So if you have any product questions for him, he'd be a great person to answer for that, and also any other technical questions that you may have. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great day.